In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. With all the rain we got this past week, I'm tired of the mud. Dogs track it in every time we let them outside. And we're tired of the rising streams and rivers that pose a threat to some of our homes. A nice dry spell sounds good, doesn't it? But the wet week that we've had and our craving for the skies to call a halt makes it a little harder for us to connect with the full force of Jeremiah's warnings about drought. I mean, the timing could not have possibly been worse. And it also doesn't help that we live in a place where too much water is more of a problem than not enough. And even when drought does strike us, it's usually small impact. We might fret over our gardens or fuss about the price of fresh produce in the grocery. When it's too dry, our lawns might turn brown, especially if there are water restrictions imposed. But really, it's no big deal. The irrigation, for the most part, helps preserve our food supply. And if it doesn't, farmers have crop insurance. And even when it gets really bad, our faucets still run, something that we too often take for granted. Of course, we do know that droughts can be very dangerous. The news shows how devastating it can be when the rains don't fall. Images of cracked, desolate ground, emaciated children, frantic crowds jostling around relief trucks filled with supplies. In our own country, parched forests catch on fire and blaze for days and weeks, consuming everything in their path. But for the most part, those problems of drought are far away in both time and place, at least for now. As our planet heats up, the incidence of drought in some parts of the world, including our own, may increase. But for the moment, everything's okay. The worst of it won't arrive for a generation or two, and most of us will be dead by then. So why worry? Let our children and grandchildren sort all that out. Yes, for most of us, droughts are just a nuisance, and that can make the Bible's metaphors of drought less compelling. Take, for instance, what we heard from the prophet Jeremiah and from the Psalm. Both give ominous warnings about drought and its dire consequences. Those who trust human strength more than God shall be like a shrub in the desert, wrote Jeremiah, and shall not see when relief comes. They shall be in parched places of the wilderness in an uninhabited salt land. On the other hand, those who do trust God above all others and above all else, they are like trees planted by streams of water, claims the Psalm, bearing fruit in due season, with leaves that do not wither. Everything they do shall prosper. For the first people who heard those words, the meaning was very relevant and clear and scary. That image resonated for them because they lived in a pretty dry climate where water was precious and the desert not far away. Water meant life to them in a way that we cannot fully appreciate. But even for those of us for whom drought has never been a life or death experience, the meaning is clear enough. Our relationship with God is the only thing that gives us life and saves us from desiccation and death. And nothing else can come first. Nothing else can come before God, whether it be family or friends or money or power or prestige or just having fun. Nothing else can get in the way of our connection with the source of life. And when we allow that to happen, we've got big trouble. Just like trees, we too can suffer from drought, a spiritual drought that brings danger and suffering. afflicted by spiritual drought, which is a self-inflicted wound, we become easy to inflame and unfruitful. We combust with a passion for things that are not of God. We get lit on fire for lesser things, transient, impermanent. We burn with desires that lead to a fundamental imbalance in our lives. Those flames consume us. And sometimes, even as we are being consumed, we love every single minute of it, until in the end we realize that we are charred and ready to collapse into a heap of ash. We self-immolate on the altar of success. And why? To Jeremiah, it's plain as day. The heart is devious above all else. It is perverse. Who can understand it? How can we escape the human tendency toward self-deception? It starts with the sacred fire that saves. A fire that purifies and consumes only the parts of us that we're really a lot better off without. We need to be on fire with the Holy Spirit, a bright and warming flame, a beacon to the world that helps bring people to Jesus. We need to seek the flame of the burning bush in the wilderness that called Moses to take a risk and free his enslaved brothers and sisters in Egypt, despite the fact there were charges of murder against him in that place. We need to pray and hope for the Spirit's Pentecostal flame that rested on the heads of the original disciples and gave them power to share the gospel with people from many different places, many different types of backgrounds and languages. We need to be on fire for the right reasons, set alight by the right flame, God's. And along with that holy purifying fire, God gives us purifying water as well. We need to plant our souls close to the water by the waters of our baptisms that cleanse and renew and inspire growth in faith. We need to be, to borrow words from the Psalm and from Jeremiah, and this is a bit of a mashup, we need to be like trees planted by streams of water, sending out our roots by the stream, trees which yield their fruit in due season with leaves that do not wither, trees who shall not fear when heat comes. In the year of drought, it is not anxious and it does not cease to bear fruit. When we plant our souls near God's healing water and spread out our roots, we come to know the truth about who we are and who we are meant to someday become. Sunk into the water, we learn about how the world is and what the world could someday become if we accept and share God's grace, God's wisdom that exposes the lies that surround us. Immersed in the fount of God's blessing, the source of all true life, drought cannot destroy or even harm us. But we often set down our roots someplace else. And when we do put our roots down near the stream of living water, a lot of times we don't spread them out. Instead of spreading out, we keep our roots close and risk drying up in the process. No plant can fully mature and bear fruit without a root system spread out as far as it can go. We all know from weeding our gardens that the ones who spread out the most are the hardest ones to get rid of. When we keep our roots close, we shy away from exploring our God-given potential. Maybe because we fear what's out there and how what's out there might respond if we really live into our God-given potential. But I think more often we're afraid of what's in here, afraid that what we might find will cause inconvenience or something more, like a serious alteration in the way that we live day to day. When we keep our roots close, we close the possibility of yielding fruit. And there is a logic to that. We know that yielding fruit is a sacrifice. Producing fruit takes a lot of energy, and it does not directly benefit the plant that produces it. Fruit offers food for others and seed for the next generation of plants. Neither of those promote the health and well-being of the plant. In fact, it costs the plant. But Christians who are fruitless can scarcely be called Christians, because the sacrifice of fruit to give seed and sustenance for others is at the heart of what it means to be a faithful disciple of Jesus Christ. No fruit, and the future of our faith comes into question. No fruit, and we waste the grace of God. Grace is free, but it is not cheap. A high price was paid for our grace on the cross. And God calls us to respond with gratitude, a gratitude that motivates us to fruitful sacrifice. We have a solemn responsibility that is also a privilege to put down our roots in the water of God so that we can lay down the seeds that help create new followers of Jesus. Now, none of that is simple or easy or painless, but it brings life and joy and fulfillment. Just imagine someone you love who needs a kidney, and you're the only match. So you give one of yours so that your friend or family member can live. Doing that obviously means that you're going to lose something. And in the process, you're going to get sliced open. It's going to hurt a lot before it heals. It'll take a while before you make it back to full strength. But there's no doubt in my mind that not a one of us would have a single moment's regret, because compared to the gift of life, all of that temporary weakness and suffering is a small price to pay. The sacrifice we offer for others, and we often forget this, the sacrifice we offer for others is also a sacrifice we offer to Jesus in thanksgiving. And that sacrifice sets us free to abide in the peace of holy water and sacred flame. Set down your roots and let them spread far and wide. Avoid drought by soaking in baptismal waters, and from that nurturing water, receive growth in your faith. Dwell in the fire that cleanses, not consumes, the fire that grants perspective on what is truly important in life, so that we can be filled with joy instead of emptied by a futile quest for satisfaction that the world promises but never delivers on.